All right, guys, welcome back to Falcon Central Radio on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am your host, Aaron Freeman, joined by my co-host, Scott Karasik. We are back after a brief hiatus. Scott was off, doing honeymoon type of stuff, whatever. I don't know why that stuff is more important than football. But we're back, and we're going to talk about the Falcons
That's
year-end.
why Aaron's single.
You know, I could say a lot more, but I'll let it go. I'll let it slide. I just think you're slacking, Scott. But we'll do the award winners. We'll pick our various award winners for tonight's action for this, at least the Falcons season, and we'll also answer you guys' mailbag questions on today's episode. So let's jump right into it. Let's talk about the Falcons award winners. We'll go piece by piece. Most valuable player. I have Julio Jones. I think Julio Jones is the best player on the Falcons. I think he's the guy that really makes this team and offense go quite a bit. And, even though he had a down year in a lot of ways, I don't think it really was that down other than the touchdowns being down. Basically had the same amount of catches and yards that he had a year ago. It's just the touchdowns, and that was more a symptom of the entire offense not scoring as many points as they did in previous years. So I certainly think if Julio, was considered the best player on the team last year, then he certainly still should be considered the best player on the team this year. And Scott, who do you have for your MVP?
I mean, I can't really go with anybody else other than Julio Jones. The only other guy I could maybe think of is like Alex Mack. But even then.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Offensive Player of the Year. I give it to basically the second best player in the offense that isn't Julio Jones. And I went with Devonta Freeman. Devonta Freeman, to me, was the most consistent offensive player on the Falcons team this year. I was about to say offensive player in the Falcons offense. He was the most consistent player in the Falcons offense this year, consistently good, very high success rate throughout the first part of the season, then sort of got slowed down by that concussion that knocked him out of 2 games, but came back strong, finished fairly strong, and I think, would have had, was considered for a good portion of the season before that injury, arguably one of the 2 or 3 best running backs in the league at that point in time. So I think he deserves credit for that, and I've given my offensive player of the year to Devonta. Who you got, Scott?
Again, that's another tough one. If you're thinking consistency, Devonta Freeman works, but then he was also injured. If I was going to go with anybody, though, I'm going to go with Alex Mack. You want the most consistent, week in, week out, give you a great performance kind of player, it's him.
Fair enough. All right, Defensive Player of the Year. For me, this is Keon O'Neill. I think similar to Devonta, he was the most consistently good player on the Falcons defense from week 1 to the very end of the season. I think certainly you can make a case for multiple defensive players, whether that's Grady Jarrett, whether that's Deion Jones, whether that's Desmond Trufant, etc. I think for me, Keanu was just so consistently good playing for the Falcons this year on the defensive side of the ball, whether that was playing against the run, whether that was playing in coverage. I think for most of the season until really the last month of the season, I certainly claimed it, but you can certainly make the case that he was the best linebacker on the team prior to that until Deion Jones' emergence. And with his cover skills, his ability to sort of keep tight ends in check, good and even some of the better tight ends like a Gronk in check, I think Keon O'Neill certainly was deserving of being a Pro Bowl vote this year. I'm happy that he got that honor, and it's nice to see him get recognized nationally for what I think was a pretty outstanding season.
Yeah, I got to go with a different player. I think the best, most consistent player on the defense this year didn't even make the Pro Bowl and probably should have, and Grady Jarrett. He was always creating pressure. He was always penetrating. He was always drawing double teams. He was always just impacting games almost every single play. Just If I had to pick a guy who really stood out this year, it's Grady Jarrett.
Okay. Fair enough. Can't dispute that. You could really go in multiple directions with Defensive Player of the Year.
I'm surprised you're
Rookie of
not
the
in
Year.
love with Grady Jarrett as much as you were with Jonathan Babineau, though, because he's just like a better Jonathan Babineau.
Well, look, I'm still getting over the heartache that was Jonathan Babineau. Like, it's going to take me time for me to jump headlong into another relationship with another defensive
You mean
tackle.
his forced retirement, basically?
Yes,
They're like,
it's
dude, you're 35. Go retire. Enjoy your life. Enjoy your wife.
it's gonna be a while. Okay, like Grady Jarrett's great, but I just can't open my heart up to that sort of relationship again. So it'll be tough for me. Rookie of the Year. I went with Takk McKinley. I think this is an obvious choice. I don't think I need to explain this too much. He got better as the season wore on. He came in with the most expectations. For me, at least, I had pretty low expectations on Takk going into the year, but he shattered those expectations. And I think for the most part, even the people that had really high expectations, for the most part, he shattered those expectations. So, Scott, I guess, do you have another pick other than Takk McKinley for Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, sure. Sean Harlow.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
come on. No, it's Takk, and it's only ever going to be Takk. And I think next year we're going to be talking about him being a 12 to 13 sack guy, just destroying defensive ends as he gets pretty much double the snaps that he got this year. He had 8 sacks and like 450 snaps between all the games, the playoff games, regular season. I can't wait to see what he does with 50, 60 snaps a game.
Definitely. So next one is the biggest offseason addition. I think this was probably the smart pick going into the season. I don't think there was anybody that we brought in this offseason that changed that. For me, it was Dontari Poe. While Poe didn't quite have the year that I was hoping he would have, where he would be just dominant force of nature, I do think he had a pretty good year. Offered a lot more as a pass rusher than I was expecting. Didn't quite offer as much as a run defender as I was hoping, but he did offer quite a bit there. Also contributed on offense, was our best fullback as well, and arguably probably our best blocking tight end as well. So a lot of versatility for Dontari Poe. A solid year for him. We'll see if he gets re-signed this offseason. I think there's about a 50-50 chance of that happening. But we'll see how that goes. But certainly doesn't diminish the type of year that he had.
I thought Poe had a great year, but I would argue that the best offseason addition is the guy that's going to be here guaranteed for at least another 3 years in Takk McKinley. I think he is going to show Atlanta needed a guy who was basically like a Cliff Averill who could come in and just destroy offensive tackles. And I think McKinley can do that. And I think they're going to try and use Vic Beasley as more of that Bruce Irvin third down rusher. So there's one more piece the Falcons need, but I think Takk McKinley is the biggest offseason addition because he's shown he can be that true Leo that they need for the long term.
Yep. So next award is the Brother of the Year. I'm taking my lead from Evan Burchfield, who asked who was the Brother of the Week. In this regard, in terms of what player played well but doesn't get nearly the recognition that they deserve. There's a lot of options here. I was very close to giving it to Matt Ryan, just because I know for me personally, I rarely ever really talk about Matt Ryan in terms of how good he is in terms of that. But I had to wind up giving it to Matt Bryant, the kicker, for another outstanding season from him. His consistency at his age is really sort of rare in this league, and hopefully he'll be back for another year. But I wind up going with Matt Bryant for my Brother of the Year.
I'm a big fan of the fat guys up front. I'm going to give this to Andy Levitre. I thought throughout the year he was a rock. When he was in the game, he was a rock. He was one of the best left guards that the Falcons have had since I can remember, and he's been I don't think he gave up but 1 or 2 sacks all year over 14 games. Like, I can't be mad at Andy Levitre. I think he was the most solid player on the line week in, week out. And like, people were like, "Oh, Schweitzer." Oh, that we want Schweitzer to eventually become the right side Andy Levitre, and I think that's the best fit.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good pick. Most improved player. This is where I'm going to come in with the Grady Jarrett love, Scott, on this one. I'll give it to Grady Jarrett. I think he had a good second year a year ago, but I don't think he quite was at the level where we wanted to see. We saw flashes of that in the Super Bowl with the 3-sack performance, and I think he sort of really did pick up where he left off in that game as a run defender primarily. Was a capable pass rusher, but not necessarily a guy that dominated week in and week out, but certainly was a very disruptive presence in the run game. Was for a good portion of the season, probably a third of the year, was the team's best defensive player, particularly during that portion of the year when the Falcons were struggling between like week 4 and week 8, 9. So certainly Grady Jarrett had a great year, went from a good player a year ago to arguably one of the best defensive tackles in the league. And so that's a pretty big leap for me, and I'll give him the credit there for the most improved player.
I guess for me, it's going to be Devonta Campbell. Most of last year in 2016, he was kind of lost in both run stuffing and pass coverage. But as he continued to improve throughout the offseason and throughout this year, he's probably the Falcons' most underrated defender. He probably could have gone to a Pro Bowl as well this year, just based on what I saw. He had a lapse here and there, but for the most part, like, he was excellent on the field. He just didn't have the big plays or the interceptions or the fumble forced.
Absolutely. For me, the next award is the biggest disappointment. And I had to go with, of course, the great offensive coordinator, Steve Sarkisian. In terms of expectations, I certainly would claim that I probably had lower expectations on Sark than probably 99% of the fan base going into the year. But even then, he didn't really meet the expectations I had going into the year. And I was still expecting this team to be a top 10 to 12 type of offense at worst, top 5, top 8 type of offense probably at best. And to basically finish, 15th in scoring this year. The offense, wasn't awful by any means, but certainly the lack of explosiveness, the lack of consistency in the red zone, and sort of how much this team sort of relied on its ability to basically out-execute its teams as opposed to out-scheme them and out-create them, I think was a real disappointing aspect of Sark's performance this year. It's been talked about a ton. We talk about it pretty much every week on the show with, the play calling and whatnot. So not necessarily anything new I need to bring up, but certainly did not live up to expectations as far as I'm concerned.
I can't disagree with that. He was a disappointment. And I think that the Falcons bringing in Greg Knapp this year says Sark has one more year to get his shit together, or they're going to convert over to Greg Knapp. And Greg Knapp knows how to run a, Shanahan-style scheme because that's what Greg Knapp runs. He runs the zone blocking. He runs the rollout passes. He runs all that stuff. Basically, the offense that they tried to run with Michael Vick, they ran with Matt Ryan, and they were successful. And for the longest time, I was calling for that kind of offense for Matt Ryan because I thought that's how he would be most successful. And I think they need to go back to it. And I think if you've got a guy who understands the ins and outs of it and has been in it since, how long has Greg Knapp been part of that offense? 2 decades, 3 decades now?
It's been a while.
Yeah, like he's been part of it since he was the quality control coach in 1997 for San Francisco under Steve Mariucci. So 21 years. If there's anybody who knows that offense, it's him.
Fair enough. All right, the next award is the favorite win of the season. I am taking the Dallas win in Week 10. That was because it was one of the more complete wins from the Falcons. I think it was really sort of a standout performance from the Falcons defense. It also came at a point in the season where I was pretty much ready to check out of the season. And my expectation going into that game was that the Cowboys would take care of business even without Zeke Elliott, and the Falcons, pretty much, their season would be just sort of circling the drain after that point, coming off of that Panthers game where they lost. And that did not come to fruition, and the Falcons played one of the more complete performances on both sides of the ball. Good offense. That was really the first time pretty much all year that we saw the Falcons come out in the third quarter and actually look good. And they played probably their best quarter in the third quarter of that particular game, in addition to the first quarter. So that wound up being my favorite pick for my favorite win in terms of what I like to see this year. And in regard to sort of the Falcons, there was a lot of other games that I could have picked here that certainly probably had a little bit more entertainment value. But in terms of how it affected me, it sort of reinvigorated me for the back half of the season. And so that's why it's my favorite win.
I think for me, my favorite win of the season, my favorite moment of the season was that first Saints game. And seeing Drew Brees drop back on a 2nd and goal. And in that situation, thinking, oh man, he's about to throw a touchdown. Because, it's Drew Brees, it's the Falcons, Brees is a fuckhead. Like, it's just the way shit works.
Okay.
And then Deion Jones leaps and intercepts him. And basically just Stone Cold Steve Austin's right to his face. Cracks a couple beers, throws up a couple middle fingers, and is like, what now? And to me, that was the moment that this defense was like, we're fucking here. We're here, and we're here to win games for this team. And I think they've been building since that game, kind of like how they got rocked by the Eagles, and then the second half of last year, they just destroyed people on defense. This year, they kind of continued that momentum. They weren't as good, but they were better than they were. You kind of saw a little bit more of that after that moment. They just got better on defense again this year. So I would love to see them continue the momentum that they had even through the playoffs. I mean, they allowed 15 points to the Eagles. Defense wasn't why they lost that game. So I would say the Falcons really do. I would say that Saints first game, that just Deion Jones yanking the ball, deboing the ball out of the air was just beautiful. So.
Fair enough. Now, the opposite award is the worst lost or least favorite lost or whatever you want to call it. Certainly the Miami game was a game that people complained about quite a bit in the back half of the season as an inexplicable loss. But the Patriots game really takes the cake in terms of everybody circled that game back in February of when we play the Patriots. That's going to be our revenge game. When the schedule came out in April, and we saw it was going to be a primetime game in the middle of the season, everybody circled that day as this is where we sort of get that 28-3 monkey off of our back or whatever, just by going out there and beating the Patriots. They lose to the Dolphins. They really just crap the bed in the second half against the Dolphins team. But the expectation is, okay, yeah, these last couple of games haven't gone the Falcons' way, but they'll get up for this Patriots game. Patriots defense is reeling. They'll be able to, do the things that they need to do to win that game, or at least make it a competitive game. Even for someone like me who didn't necessarily have expectations going into the year that the Falcons would beat the Patriots, I certainly thought it would be a competitive game. And then to see the Falcons come out and basically not score until like the last 5 minutes of that game on basically what was Julio Jones just strong-arming a DB in the end zone, and that's the only reason that we scored. It was just a real disappointing performance from the Falcons to just basically watch them have nothing. And that sort of was not necessarily, obviously Sark is coming back, but it really was the beginning of the end for Sark's, popularity in Atlanta, because that game to me really takes the cake as like the worst coordinated game of the Falcons season,
Mm-hmm.
from Steve Sarkisian. Say what you want to say about the Eagles game. I think that Patriots game was a horrifically worse performance. So, oddly enough, both of those teams are in the Super Bowl this weekend. So, maybe just Sark is really awful against Super Bowl teams. So that'll be something to watch for 2018 when you're making your bets, I guess.
Yeah, and I feel like execution was more of an issue against the Patriots than like actual flow of game play calling, but that was the game that the entire offense was like, it feels different this year. It feels like they don't know what the hell they're doing. So I'm very happy to see that they brought in Greg Knapp, because I feel like when it comes to the overall structure of the offense and how the offense works, that's who you need. When it comes to game planning throughout the week, the guy who's like, hey, maybe you should go with this play instead of that play in the game plan, because this is how this offense functions. You run the outside zone, not that toss crack. They ran that toss crack way too much. And they need someone to come in and basically smack Sark upside the head and be like, we're an outside zone running team. That's our bread and butter, not the toss crack. Run 3 of those a game, not 10.
Fair enough. Next award is the most underrated player. For me, I went with Austin Hooper. I feel like Austin Hooper's gotten a lot of negativity and criticism this season, inexplicable from my perspective. This was something that Charles and I talked about last week, on last week's show, in terms of why people are hating on Austin Hooper to the degree that they are. That people are ready to give up on him, a second-year player that really showed significant improvement this year. Again, it's I explained it a week ago, but it's because people look at 3 or 4 negative plays, 3 or 4 drops or poorly run routes or whatever that went the wrong way for the Falcons and maybe came at the worst possible time for the Falcons, and that defines a player's entire season, which is silly and ridiculous. Another part of it is because of the abnormally high expectations on Austin Hooper coming into the year. The expectation that as a second-year player that he would be, an elite tight end on the same level as a guy like Kelsey or Gronk or Jordan Reed or Zach Ertz or something like that, which again was ridiculous. And so Austin Hooper for me is the most underrated player on the Falcons right now. A good player, may not be a superstar by any means, but he doesn't need to be in order to be a good player. I mean, yeah, yeah. So who's your most underrated player, Scott?
I mean, I was going to go with Austin Hooper, but you'd already gone with him, and I think Hooper's great. Hooper's a great choice for this. He had an excellent season, and there's no reason to have the hate that he has in the fan base. I don't get it. He's a second-year player in a completely different offense not completely different, but in a slightly different offense from what he ran the year before, and he wasn't used the same way. And I think he would be better had he just stuck in the Shanahan offense, but I digress. I'm going to go with Ricardo Allen. Rico still gets shit on by the fan base for whatever reason, and he is excellent. He's not the best safety in the league. Yeah, the Falcons could improve on him with a better athlete, someone who's more instinctual in deep coverage, and, slide him down to the nickel. But Ricardo Allen will always have a place on this Atlanta Falcons team as long as Dan Quinn's the coach. And whether it's as the nickel cornerback, whether it's the starting free safety, he belongs on this team, and he is going to continue to stay on this team. And honestly, I wouldn't hate the idea of them basically in nickel packages using KZ at free safety as opposed to Allen, and then having Allen play the nickel corner, because I think that puts best 5 defensive backs on the field. So to me, it's Rico.
Fair enough. All right, most underrated to now most overrated player. And this is the guy that caught a lot of my ire through the second half of the season. I think particularly when Deion Jones' play started stepping up and he no longer was the focus of my anger. This is a linebacker for the Falcons in Devon Campbell, who I think is the most overrated player. It's hard coming up with an overrated player because unlike previous years, it didn't feel like people's were hyping up one guy way too much like they have in past years. I think Campbell had a good season. I think he's more of an average, slightly above average starter. I think people talk about him like he's a star, like he's one of the best linebackers in the league. I don't think he is. Again, not to take anything away from him, I think he's a perfectly fine, capable starter that does a lot of good stuff in coverage and occasionally is a capable run defender and certainly can bring a lot as a blitzer and a pass rusher. So he certainly has a role in this team, but I don't see him as one of the 5 or 6 best players on this Falcons defense, which is I think more also not just a testament to Campbell being overrated, but also a testament to the quality of players that the Falcons now have emerging on their defense. So Campbell's solid player, but not necessarily a superstar that I think at certain points this season people were talking about him potentially becoming.
I mean, for me, it's going to be Tailor Gabriel. I realize that Gabriel can do a lot of good things and a lot of special things in an offense, but they're not the standard wide receiver things. You have to scheme him open. You have to scheme him open and not over the middle of the field. You have to make sure he has open space to run. You run a lot of screens with him. You run a lot of slants with him. So while I do like Tailor Gabriel, I think he's a bit overrated for what he is. Still a good player, but people are talking like he's the best slot receiver in the league. The best slot receiver in the league will make it work and would be more valuable than he's shown. He's not really a slot receiver. He's an outside guy. And I wish him well when he goes to San Francisco next year.
Okay. I think Tailor Gabriel's underrated, but certainly by Steve Sarkisian, but that I'll save that for a conversation. We'll get to March and we can talk more about Tailor Gabriel. Best individual performance for me, that was Julio's 253-yard game against the Bucs in Week 12. What more do I have to say? Julio goes off at least for 1 or 2 games a year, and it's a joy to watch. And that was his big game this season, and it was a joy to watch. Scott, who you pick?
Grady Jarrett, Week 17 versus Carolina. He was just wrecking the guy they put in front of him. I can't even remember the guy's name. I just know he was some rookie, and he was awful. And Grady Jarrett made him look like a rookie who was awful. He was throwing him around. He was ragdolling him. He hit Cam Newton 3 times in the backfield that they counted as quarterback hits, but he was hitting Cam all the time. He had 3 tackles for loss on top of that. He was just dominating. That was his best performance of the year, and it came right when they needed it too. He was a destroyer, and he wasn't letting Carolina get anything on offense. And he single-handedly held Carolina to, 4 points, or not 4 points, 14 points, I think, 10 points, something like that. It was one of their lowest outputs of the season. And they had 10 points, and he single-handedly was doing that. He was killing them.
Okay. All right, our final award comes, and it is the most likely to succeed on another team in 2018. It's a mouthful. For me, I picked probably the person you could guess is Tailor Gabriel. I think Tailor Gabriel offers a lot more than 4 plays that Steve Sarkisian ran for him this year, which were jet sweeps, screen passes, deep posts, and drag routes. I do think he's capable of running a full route tree. I do think he's no more required to be schemed open than Mohamed Sanu or any other wide receiver on this team that's not named Julio Jones. So my expectation is Tailor Gabriel will go to some other team, hopefully for his sake, since I'm assuming that the Falcons won't make a competitive offer to keep his services, given how poorly used he was this year. And even if they did, I would expect Tailor Gabriel to look for options elsewhere, greener pastures elsewhere. So my expectation and my hope for Tailor Gabriel, because I do like him a lot, and I think he was instrumental in the Falcons getting to the Super Bowl a year ago. I hope he goes to somewhere else that knows how to use him. And, should he be successful for that team, I wish him the best, assuming that they're not on the Falcons' schedule next year. I don't know if that's going to be San Francisco just because they already have Marquise Goodwin. But we'll see how it goes. And hopefully he winds up being successful, and maybe he can throw it back in the Falcons' face a little bit.
For me, it's going to be Adrian Claiborne. Just because I think he's the guy that's going to, I don't know, there's just something about how he came off this past year that says he's finally back to the guy we thought he was going to be in like 2011 and 2012 when he was putting up 8 sacks in that year, or 6-7 sacks in that year. And I was like, this guy's going to be good. This guy's going to be a destroyer. He's good inside, outside. And I think he's going to look a lot like a not younger Michael Bennett, but like the Michael Bennett of this year, next year.
Fair enough. We got a couple of questions from a listener. From Evan Burchfield, of course. One of them is the Listener of the Year award. Scott, do you have a choice here?
Sorry, Evan. I got to go with Big Boy Brewski.
No
reason why other than his name. I just love the name, Big Boy Brewski.
It is a great name. Yeah. I always enjoy reading Bruce's questions just because his name is Big Boy Brewski. I'll throw you a bone, Evan. You are the Listener of the Year because you basically were able to you still haven't gotten your football from Jack Crawford, from what I understand. So the fact that you still stayed loyal to this podcast, even though back in, what was it, March or April, where you got you won a signed football from Jack Crawford, and it's now February and you still haven't gotten it. You deserve Listener of the Year for your patience and your humility in regard to that whole situation. So appreciate it, Evan. Evan's other award offering suggestion is the worst play of the year.
I'm gonna go down to the final play of the season.
Yeah, that's a good pick. It's a good pick.
Because think about it. You tried it against the Saints in week 15 or the 15th game, and it didn't work. The exact same play, exact same situation, just 6 yards back with the Saints. Why would you call that play again? Ever. If it doesn't work, you throw that shit out of the playbook. Call something different. Like, I don't know, 7 offensive linemen. Dentari Poe at fullback. Austin Hooper as your offset tight end. Devonta Freeman in the backfield. And you either call Devonta Freeman up the fucking middle for 2 yards with Poe and 7 offensive linemen blocking for him. Big boy football. If you don't get it then, you didn't deserve to win. Or you get a little cute and you call that little play action where, Hooper goes off into the flat a little bit and, Ryan rolls out and hits Hooper in the flat. Either one of those plays would have been fine. And you give Matt Ryan both plays and you say, check to which play you see best at the line. All you got to do. But no, Sarkisian way overthought it and called some goofy no back set that doesn't help anybody and it's just fucking stupid. The whole entire season rests on the one play. And you call the one play that didn't work at all the entire season. What the fuck were you thinking?
See, aren't you guys glad that Scott's back from his honeymoon now? He can save this rant for not doing it a week ago to today. So certainly, yeah, that's a good pick. Uh, I don't need to say anything else other than that. I'll go back, way back into the jet sweep for at the 4th and goal against that was against the Patriots, right? I don't even remember who we played, but it was so awful that I just blocked it out of my mind. So yeah, certainly the red zone calls certainly would be some of the worst plays of the year for the Falcons um, offense this
The,
year.
the only other play I would suggest, because it was fluke as shit and it happened against the Saints, is the butt interception.
Yeah, that one's pretty tough.
Like, yeah, Marvin Hall catch the fucking ball. But if a ball lands on a dude's ass and he intercepts it that way, like, I hate to say it this way, you just had shit luck that day. You really just had shit luck.
Pretty much.
And that day out, the minute that happened, I'm like, oh, we're totally getting fucked. We're totally getting screwed today.
Yeah, that happened. Okay, let's move on to the mailbag questions. We got plenty today. First up is Brian at your homeboy Brian. As of this moment, what would you say the chances are Tevin Coleman is a Falcon long term? Considering the fact that Sark leans on the run more and Devontae's concussions, it seems like signing Tevin Coleman would be important.
I have to agree. Tevin Coleman's a very important running back. But the Falcons could also just draft a guy in this super deep running back class in like the 4th round and be fine. And if they happen to have an extra 7th round pick, why not take another running back then? I'd be open to like a 4th round and a 7th round running back. And especially if that 7th round guy can also play fullback.
Yeah, look, I think the chances are pretty good, better than people think, or better than some people think. I don't know if I would go so far as say it's likely. At this point in time, I think it's a 50-50 shot. Again, I think this is similar to sort of the Robert Alford issue, which, as you guys may recall, many years ahead of that situation, I was saying, oh, there's no chance the Falcons are going to re-sign Robert Alford. Scott was adamant that they could do it and should do it. And, Scott wound up being right for the first time ever, if I say so. But no,
I'm right a lot more than you give me credit for. I'll put it that way. I don't rub it in your face the way you do when you're right.
Yeah.
That's how often you're wrong.
Yeah, that's what I do. But no, look, I think the situation is interesting because of Devontae's concussions, the fact that they are sort of linked up a little bit. I think there's still 2 more years of guaranteed money in Devontae's contract beyond this year. But we may get to a situation by the end of this upcoming season where everybody is looking at Tevin Coleman as being the lead dog and the guy of the future, given Devontae's issues, or anything could happen between now and next March. And Devontae could get hurt, Tevin could get hurt, Tevin could come out and have a 1,500-yard season, he could have a 400-yard season, or whatever the case may be. Who knows? The running back position is really one of those position groups that there's constant shuffling. Who is at the top? You only had, like, of the top 10 rushers last year, only 4 of them finished in the top 10 this year. The previous year, of the top 10 rushers, only 1 of them finished in the top 10 the following year. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of turnover here. And could Coleman be back long term? Absolutely. Could he not? Who knows? And I think trying to figure out where the Falcons are going to be, in March of 2019 on that decision today is just kind of just throwing darts at a board and guessing. So I just think you got to take a wait and see approach, see how the season goes, and then make a decision after that point. Brian's next question is: the one game that disgusted me this year more than any other by far was the 23-7 loss to New England Patriots. We agree with you there, Brian. Do you think we just didn't match up well with New England, or do you think it was a mental toughness thing? We almost got shut out that game. We should have won it the most.
I think it's a case of going to New England. Since 2001, New England has lost 11 games in Gillette Stadium in the regular season. 11 games in 18 years or 17 years. You just can't win there. And as much as it sucks, you're like, all right, well, nobody wins there. And yeah, they got dominated. But I think if Atlanta plays New England this coming year in Atlanta in the Super Bowl, completely different game. I think that team also got psyched up for the game a little too much. I don't think it was a mental toughness thing. I think they went in, they put their best shot out there. I think the coaches got a little overpsyched, especially Sark, and didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, no, whether it was one of the issues that you named, Brian, I don't know. But all I know is watching that game, the Falcons got dominated up front on defense. Their run defense was awful in that game. It was probably the worst game they performed all year as far as the run defense goes. And the play calling on offense to me was pretty poor. They didn't really do anything to attack the Patriots' coverages, and so you saw guys like Johnson, Batamosi, and other guys being able to lock up all wide receivers because, and again, this was an issue that sort of reared its ugly head in the Eagles game. We don't really call passing concepts that really are designed to really attack teams. It's just more like we're going to run these basic routes and these vanilla route combinations, and if you can stop it, then you're going to stop it. And we've seen various teams over the course of the season. The Eagles did it, the Vikings did it, Patriots did it. They were able to stop it because it's not really that hard to stop. Basically, any competent defense in the NFL should be able to stop it. And we saw that throughout this season, where when we faced competent defenses or good defenses, this offense really, really stagnated. And so I think those were the issues, whether that was attributed to, lacking mental toughness or not being able to match up well. I don't necessarily know if I would go there with those two issues, but I just think the Falcons didn't show up for that game in really any capacity, which was unexpected. So maybe that is a little bit of mental toughness. Brian's next question is, how many more years do you see Matt Bryant kicking for our Falcons, and would you say he is better than Falcons legend Morten Andersen?
Matt Bryant is the best kicker that the Atlanta Falcons have ever had. He's converted 88% of his kicks in Atlanta. Of his misses in Atlanta, nine of them are from 50 plus. So from under 50 yards, he's arguably the most accurate kicker in almost NFL history. He needs to be in the Hall of Fame. He is a Hall of Fame caliber kicker. And the fact that he's barely even been to Pro Bowls is kind of ridiculous to me because he's that good. He's only been to one Pro Bowl, and he has been statistically a better kicker than Morten Andersen, who's in the NFL Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would say Matt Bryant has been the better Falcon kicker. In terms of whether he has had a better career than Morten Andersen has had, it's hard to say that. I mean, Morten Andersen has basically made 200 more field goals than Matt Bryant has made in his career. And so Morten Andersen, the reason why he's in the Hall of Fame is playing at a high level for as long as he did. Morten Andersen basically played like 23 seasons in the NFL. And Matt Bryant played like 15 or so. So it's one of those things where it's just like he can't compare in that regard. But in terms of what they did in Atlanta, a lot of Morten Andersen's success came in New Orleans because he played 15 years in New Orleans prior to coming to Atlanta or whatever it was. So I do think as a Falcons kicker, Matt Bryant is number one on the list. But in terms of talking about whether Matt Bryant deserves to be in the Hall of Fame or belongs in the Hall of Fame or has had a better career than Morton Anderson, I don't necessarily go that far. And, whether, Matt Bryant, Football Outsiders named Matt Bryant a couple of years ago the best clutch kicker of all time, which is certainly valuable. But, since there's only, like 2 kickers in the Hall of Fame, I don't think that's going to be enough to get him in. And when you have guys like Steven Gostkowski and Justin Tucker that are sort of his peers at this current time, I don't expect Matt Bryant to get the recognition that maybe he does deserve over some of those guys when we get into Hall of Fame conversations. Again, Adam Vinatieri's a future Hall of Famer probably just because of the amount of championships he's won and whatnot. But, Matt Bryant's been great. And, I wish he could have gotten a couple more Pro Bowls. I hope he continues to play with the Falcons for a couple more years and is able to get a couple more Pro Bowls to indicate how good a player he's been, but it is what it is. Evan Burchfield, of all the potential Falcons free agents, who do you most want back in 2018?
Not including Ricardo Allen, who's a restricted free agent. I'm already considering him back because he's a restricted free agent. I'm going to have to say Dontari Poe. I know he's going to cost a little bit, but I think having that big, fat nose tackle in the middle, playing next to Grady Jarrett, and having him for a 3 or 4 year deal would be great because you'd be able to set that interior of the line for a long term. And then you really go into the draft just trying to find that replacement for Adrian Claiborne. That there's 3 guys that in this draft that would be great replacements for Adrian Claiborne. They could play both sides of the ball. So for me, it's Dontari Poe.
For me, it's the guy I just talked about, Matt Bryant. I look at the Falcons free agents, and Matt Bryant's the only guy that I'm like, he definitely should be back. If he's not back, then something horribly, horribly has gone wrong. But, of course.
Or he retired.
Yeah, the possibility that he retires is out there. But if he's playing, if he still wants to play, then he's definitely the one guy that I would definitely say. Beyond that, Ataba Rubin, Kamal Ishmael, Claiborne, Poe would probably be the next 4 on the list. I would love to see Tailor Gabriel come back, but as I said earlier, I think there's probably like a 0.1% chance of that happening at this point. So Matt Bryant stands above the rest, but then the next couple of guys, there's some guys on that list that I would more than welcome back. NJ Falcons, Ronan at Mave2124 asks, awesome contract story on Matt Ryan by Vaughn on ESPN. My question, do the Falcons do a 5-year or 6-year deal for our quarterback?
The most they can do is a 5-year deal through the CBA.
I don't think the most you can do is a 5-year deal. I think the most you can prorate bonuses is a 5-year deal.
No, the most you can add on for an extension is 5 years. It would technically be a 6-year deal because they have the 1 year already under contract, but the most you can extend due to the CBA is 5 years. The most you can sign any contract under the CBA is 5 years, unless it's an outside free agent. That's when it's 6 years.
Okay, I did not know that. So you learn something new every day, guys. For me, if it was me, and before I knew that information, I would have said give him a 7-year, $200 million contract. But I guess you can't do that. So
I like your thinking. I really like your thinking on that because you could structure it really well. He'd be the highest paid player ever, and
yeah, I mean, basically, you could structure it so that you can delay some of the bonuses so that you don't have to eat this $50 million signing bonus that you would have to probably wind up doing on a 5-year deal, which is just ridiculous. You can just layer it with, a substantial signing bonus. It's still going to be a ridiculously high one, but then you can do an option bonus in year 2, then you can do another option bonus in year 3, and so you can layer the guaranteed money over time on a 7-year deal and just sort of prorate all those bonuses over the course of 5 years. But if you can't,
or why not do potentially proratable roster bonuses?
No, I mean, you could do roster bonuses, but since roster bonuses, there was some ruling that roster bonuses something about like I think it was part of like the whole Vic thing where like you can't players. I don't know. It was something, but teams basically don't do roster bonus because they can't get that money back or something like that. So the Falcons don't really do roster bonuses to the same level that other teams do. They often like to do option bonuses. They like to do the split signing bonus, option bonus, which is what they did on the last Ryan contract, I'm pretty sure. But
they also do a lot of roster bonuses, or not roster bonuses, but like
they
per
do
game
those
roster bonus.
those per game roster bonuses.
Basically
They do that.
incentives.
But like the Matt Ryan per game roster bonuses would be so high that it would just be ridiculous at that point. Be like, here's $325,000 for just playing one game.
Yeah, it's normally like $500,000 for a season for a guy's roster bonus. Like Jack Crawford's roster bonus is $250K per game or per year. So if he plays the entire year, he gets $250K. If he doesn't get it. But when it's nice because it's given the Falcons an extra like $180K worth of cap space this year because he only played 3 games.
Yeah, those per game roster bonuses that the Falcons give out. I can't recall if anybody's gotten like $1 million over the course of a year, but it is usually either $250 or $500K over the course of 16 games.
Yeah, the closest to that was what was it? Paul Soliai had $800K his first year here in those per game roster bonuses, but they all hit the cap because he'd played every game the year before, so it might as well just been a full on roster bonus anyway.
Yeah, but the point I was making is because Ryan's bonus money and his guarantee money is going to be so high, those per game roster bonuses are sort of useless because you're talking about guaranteed monies in the up to $100 million as opposed to in the case of a lot of these other guys where it's just like $10 million or $15 million. And so those per game roster bonus would be abnormally high if you're trying to fill in a significant portion of his contract to do that. So I hope that answers your question, Maeve, aka Andy. Evan Burchfield asks, even though nobody takes the Pro Bowl seriously, is it a good sign that the Falcons have 2 of their youngest stars make it, Jones and Neal?
Yeah, it's a good sign. I know that people don't take the Pro Bowl seriously, but I think this year and the last 2 years, really, they've got it right on their rosters. Just looking at the rosters, I see maybe one guy who didn't belong on like either team. So, I mean, overall, yeah, like DeCastro belonged. Incognito would be like a guy I'm like, I don't know. But if you go through every single roster out there, there's maybe 1 or 2 guys who you're like, yeah, this guy doesn't belong. And that's it.
Yeah, I think it's a good sign for the Falcons. I think it's nice to see there's some of the young defensive players getting recognized. We saw Beasley last year. Now you have Jones and Neal this year. Hopefully, maybe Grady Jarrett or somebody else will get that recognition next year. So yeah, I think it's certainly a good sign. I'm not a huge believer in taking the Pro Bowl too seriously. I do think it does have value when we talk about guys like Matt Bryant and whatnot, some of these guys that are potential Hall of Famers. When you have 5 and 6 Pro Bowls to your name, it certainly helps your cause as opposed to if you only have 1 or 2. But Jones and Neal are at the very beginning of their careers, so any conversation about their sort of legacies or their Hall of Fame status, we're talking 10, 15, maybe even 20 years from now. So that's not even really a conversation worth having. So, yeah, it's certainly a positive sign for them and a good step in the right direction for the Pro Bowl, which I agree with Scott. I think is, I think in part due to services like Pro Football Focus, people tend to get it right more often than not in recent years than it has been in past years. You still have a couple of
I don't think Larry Warford should have been in it on the NFC side. That's the only name that's sticking out to me. Larry Warford.
That's okay. I mean, he was on one of the best offensive lines in the league, so that's why he gets in.
Yeah, he was on one of the best, but I don't think he was the best guy on it, and I don't think he should have been on it. I would have said it. I would have said Andrews Pete. Like, Andrews Pete was the best player on that line, maybe Teron Armstead. So yeah, like
Okay.
I get why they put him on there, but I don't think he would have. I don't think he deserved it. And then on the defensive side, I can't think of like on the not defensive side, on the AFC side, maybe Alejandro Villanueva. So that's like, so to me, yeah, the fact that Jones and Neal made it, they deserved it.
Sorry, I was trying not to cough. Dealing with this cold.
Don't throw your back out, Aaron. I heard you got injured when I was gone.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there. We don't speak of that. Digital Demon at Digital Demon 6 asks, have you seen any players in this year's draft the Falcons have to get, in either of your opinions, a draft crush, if you will?
The one guy that I really like is Tevin Bryant. And I know a lot of people are probably wondering who the hell that is, but he's like a poor man's Joey Bosa or poor man's JJ Watt. He can hold up well. He can play the 5 tech. He can slide inside to the 3. He's 6'5", about 300 pounds. Just one of my favorite players in this draft. Like, and every time I watch him, I see something else where I'm like, damn, this guy can do that. Damn, this guy can do that. So if I was picking any player, it's Tevin Bryant. And just the attitude he plays with fits that fast physical nature that they want.
Yeah, it's early in the process for me. I don't really have a draft crush at this point in time. There's several players I've seen, including Brian, and I'm like, yeah, that guy looks like he could fit the Falcons. But really, I'm not going to really jump too far into the draft until after the combine, until we get to the first wave or two of free agency. And so, maybe I'll have a draft crush by the time we get to April. But it takes a lot for me to have a draft crush. I've really only had maybe a handful in the last couple of years. You guys know Miles Jack was one of them. Sheldon Rankins was another one that I was a big fan of. But outside those two guys, I don't even know if I had one last year.
I think you said that like Takk McKinley made too much sense, and that was it.
Stop. Yeah, but like I was certainly not crushing on Takk last year when we drafted him.
I wasn't either until he started cussing out, basically the entire NFL.
Yeah, that's what
it was like fuck quarterbacks. I'm gonna go get to the fucking quarterback. I'm like, all right, yeah, I can roll with some Takk McKinley. That's how I would play football too. Like, let's go get the fucking quarterback. All right, Takk, I'm with you. So the minute I saw that, I was like, all right, well, that works.
Yep. Okay, Derek Hunter at D-Rock the Party. What are your thoughts on drafting Shekinah Griffin for linebacker depth? What's the highest round you would do it?
Shekinah Griffin, for those that don't know who he is a linebacker that was born without a hand due to some congenital defect in his his system. I really like Shekinah Griffin. I really think that he should go probably in the 3rd, maybe 4th round, based on what I've seen on the field. I didn't know that he had declared until after I got off the boat, but that's neither here nor there. He's an excellent football player. He's a great pass rusher. The only question that I have with him is how he catches the ball, for obvious reasons, and whether he needs to eat a biscuit or two to get his weight up. Outside of that, I think he's a great player, and I think I wouldn't hate if the Falcons took him, and I think he could come in and compete for a starting job if they took him in the 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah, Griffin's a really good player. He's very reminiscent to me of Deion Jones in terms of what he has the potential to be in the NFL. Obviously, teams are looking at the fact that he has only one hand, and they're concerned about his ability in coverage. They're concerned about his ability to shed blockers and whatnot. And so the reality is he's not going to get drafted as high as his talent indicates that he's capable of. Like, I certainly think if you take out the whole, hand thing out of the equation, you just watch him play football, I don't think he's any different than many of the linebackers that have been drafted on day 2 of the last couple of drafts, including a guy like Keon Jones. But because of the hand issue, yeah, like he's he's probably like 225 soaking wet, but he's got a lot. I think he's like 6'2" or something like that. So he's a little taller, I think, than Deion Jones is. But
he's about 6'2", 225. So like to me, like it's not that he's small; it's that he's got a frame that you can add some more weight to, and he needs to fill out. But I think if you get him into an NFL strength program, he's fine. It's just you got to get him into that strength program.
Yeah. And so the thing with him is teams are going to nitpick the heck out of him, and they're going to be like, oh, well, he can only play special teams and whatever, which he's actually 6 foot and 2/8, 222. That's what he measured at the Senior Bowl. So like, I think that probably the highest he would go in the draft is probably the 4th round. I hope he goes higher than that because I think he's definitely talented enough to overcome some of the issues. Like, Deion Jones has not been the world's greatest, guy in terms of shedding blocks in the league either. So I don't think that is as big an issue as some people might make it. But like I do think probably in reality, if the Falcons are going to take him, you're looking at a player that I don't know if you're going to have him compete for a starting job. I think you're really going to draft him just to be a backup at the current time and see what he can do. And I don't necessarily know, given how much the Falcons have invested in linebacker depth over the last couple of years, I don't feel like you need to draft that player before the 5th round. But I certainly, again, I think Shaquem Griffin is worth more than that. But I think if he's there in round 5, I would probably start looking at him to draft him. But prior to that, I think I would probably look at some other needs that the Falcons have that are not necessarily as loaded with young talent as the Falcons have at the linebacker group.
I mean, if you just looked at his stats the last 2 years, I know this is like a bad way to scout, but a guy with 92 tackles, 20 tackles for loss, 11 and a half sacks in 16. And then in 17 had 74 tackles, 13 and a half for loss, 7 sacks, had a combined over the 2 years, 12 hurries, and another 10 passes broken up. Like, just hearing those stats, you're like, that guy deserves to be drafted 4th round. And when you watch him on film, it matches. And in fact, I think he's probably a little better on film. But again, you're right. He's light. He's missing a hand. Like, those are my knocks on him. And he doesn't shed blocks well because of how light he is and because it's really tough to miss a hand. So, I don't know. I would personally take him in the 3rd. I think he probably won't go until the 6th, if we're being 100% honest.
Yeah, my expectation is he probably will be talking. He'll be one of those day 3 storylines where they talk about him on NFL Network and ESPN. Like, who's going to take Shaquem Griffin? I think he will get drafted. I don't think I would be. I'm with Scott. I think it's probably 6th or 7th round. We'll see how he tests at the combine. Like if he jumps out the gym and runs like a 4.5 40 and whatnot, then I think that could sort of move him up in the 4 or 5 range for certain teams. And I think there are certain teams that will take him off their board and some teams that will still be, high on him. And it just takes one team to pull the trigger on him. I don't know. If you're asking me where I would take him, I wouldn't have a problem taking him in the 3rd round if I was picking a team. But for the Falcons specifically, I don't think they really have a major need at linebacker, and I don't think you need to be drafting backup linebackers that high. So I would probably take him if I'm the Falcons GM in the 5th
round. I think you need someone at backup linebacker just because the only guys you have under contract at linebacker right now are Duke Riley, Deion Jones, and Devonta Campbell. You need somebody.
Yeah, but there's a pretty good chance that between Ishmael and Leroy Reynolds and maybe some other guy that they can pick up off the street, that they'll be pretty good in their linebacker depth going into the draft. So I'm not too concerned about the linebacker depth at this point in time.
And that's fair.
Derek asks, what are your thoughts on drafting tight end Ryan Izzo from FSU?
Let's see. Where do I have him?
I don't know anything about Ryan Enzo, to be honest with you.
Did he declare?
Apparently he did. When I Google him, that's the first story that comes up.
I don't really know enough about him. I need to do some research. So
Yeah. Okay.
he doesn't really look super productive. Just first glance, I need to watch some film on him. Size looks solid, 6'5", 250. I need to do research on him. I don't think a guy that's not super productive at Florida State is a great watch because you have like 20 catches that you get to watch, and then you have a bunch of like shitty throws. But I'll watch him. I'll watch his blocking. I'll watch all his catches, see how he does.
Tony Pauline at draftanalyst.com has a seventh round grade on him projection. So
that's probably right. Tony knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on him. And as we move forward, certainly that because he's an underclassman, he'll have an opportunity to sort of get his first chance to really shine at the combine. And if he shows out there, he tests well there, then certainly he'll be moved higher up on the queue of guys I need to watch.
And if we find out at the combine the Falcons get 2 7th-round picks because of the comp formula, because they lost 5 and they only gained 3, that would be helpful. And that's a guy you take with one of those comp round picks.
There you go. Okay. Last question comes from Evan Burchfield. Super Bowl prediction.
Fuck both those teams. That's my Super Bowl prediction.
There you go.
I really don't give a shit who wins.
I'm rooting hardcore for the Eagles. I'm going all in on the Eagles. I need somebody to beat the Patriots just to make my life more meaningful. I don't hate the Patriots like most people do, but I am sort of sick and tired of them winning. I need some parity in my life, and them winning back-to-back Super Bowls would not make me feel better. So I'm predicting that, but that all being said, I'm expecting the Patriots to win. I'm thinking it's going to be something like 24-20 Patriots.
Sounds about right.
All right, guys. We appreciate you guys being patient with us. We know there was a little bit of a delay, and we've had some issues being on air the last couple of weeks. Part of that is owed to, Scott having a wife and whatnot. So how that goes. But we'll be back again next week to start to talk about the offseason, combine, maybe our reaction to the Super Bowl, our favorite commercial, whatever it is. You guys send in those mailbag questions. Use the hashtag Falcons Mailbag. You can tweet at the show, Falcons PFC, or Scott Karasik S. I am at FalcFans. Be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes as well as on YouTube. You can check out Scott's channel or Pro Football Central's channel. Check out the iTunes subscription at PFC Radio. That's where you can find the audio versions of this podcast. And we'll be coming back in the coming weeks to get you guys prepared for the offseason and free agency and the draft and whatnot. And so stay tuned to that, and we'll be back. See you guys.